Is our destiny already written? Destiny or free will? Which camp do you belong into?
I believe in free will more than destiny, because at the end of the day, it's the choices that you make result in a compounding interest of these small choices, and it gives you a certain output.
Today we're joined by Dr. Ebenezer Abel Paul, founder of Verve Wellness Dubai, a personalized wellness service specializing in IV drips, NAD plus therapy, gut health, and advanced diagnostics. This is just in on the Shift with CJ podcast.
Why don't humans all have like the same kind of genetics? Sensitivity to carbohydrates, and some people are more adapted to cold, and some people have like different characteristics. I just want to take it down one level basic, so the people who are understanding it, they get like a basic idea of why everyone's different in the first place.
There is code, there is information, right? DNA strands that carries trillions of data, right? That makes you who you are.
The Wellgene book is so particular about all of these different vitamins, nutrients, brain neurochemistry, pathways, and it's made for the modern person. What is in this modern environment do you think, and that you see in your patients, is making us sicker?
Is my body built for it? My mind might want it, I might want it, but can my body adapt to it? Because we are built to do some things fundamentally. We have to sleep, we have to eat, we have to work. 3 things. As a child, you go to school, as an adult, you work. But these are 3 fundamental parts of a human being.
Dr. Ibn Sar, welcome to the Shift with CJ podcast.
Thank you so much.
So I'm so happy and excited to talk to you because, I've gone through the Wellgene booklets. We've had a preliminary discussion about a month and a half ago, but I've had so many questions to ask you. But first, my first question to you is something that has always been there for the dawn of time. People, no matter which country they live in, maybe which religion or faith they belong to, always have had this question. Is our future, is our destiny already written? So I guess I'm asking you the question of destiny or free will. Which camp do you belong into?
I believe in free will more than destiny, all right? Because at the end of the day, it's the choices that you make result in a compounding interest of these small choices, and it gives you a certain output. So genetics, for example, there are 2 types of things we talk about genetics. We talk about phenotype and genotype. The genotype is fixed. There's not much you can do. But the expression of that particular gene, which is your phenotype, is dependent on lifestyle, environment, stress, and a lot of different things. So one of the misconceptions that we have in the world today is diabetes is a genetic disease. Some, to a certain extent, there's monogenic diabetes, for example. There's a gene, a variation that affects it. But type 1, type 2, let's talk about type 2. If you look at type 2 diabetes, people say, my father, my mother had diabetes, so I'm going to get diabetes. That is not necessarily on your genes. It's in the lifestyle. Maybe you have a higher risk and sensitivity towards it. Maybe like in the Wellgene book, you see that you have carbohydrate sensitivity. So you are doing the wrong things, which leads to you having a disease called type 2 diabetes. But you have choices that you can make to help reverse it, to help change it. So it's on free will and the choices that you actually make.
That's interesting because I wanted to talk to you about genetics. As we see, I'm holding this book, the Wellgene book that we spoke about earlier, and it gives you so many of these data points, right? And like diabetes, for example, if we take one step back, why don't humans all have like the same kind of genetics? Why do some people have, sensitivity to carbohydrates, and some people are more adapted to cold, and some people have like different characteristics? I just want to take it down one level basic, so the people who are understanding it, they get like a basic idea of why everyone's different in the first place.
Wow, that's such a technical and fundamental question, right? I think that is the uniqueness of us human beings as Homo sapiens. At the end of the day, we see each other as a full being, but actually it goes down to something that is super microscopic, extremely small, and how this small cell changes and grows, right? So if you go back to the fundamental, you are made out of one cell, right, which is the egg and the sperm, right? They are one cells. And proliferation of this cell division that happens makes us. There is code, there is information, right? DNA strands that carries trillions of data, right? That makes you who you are. Now, through the evolution of time, stress, environment, a lot of different factors, this information has continuously changed. We understand that. I think our forefathers 2000 years ago were very different Homo sapiens versus who we are. We today see that, you can have, for example, there was something called an ancestry DNA where they put out, and people were shocked to see that they had some ancestry that they don't even recognize from, because there's a constant shift of this DNA through all these different environments. And that's what makes us unique, right? This different information. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question.
Yeah, you're correct. Like the way I was looking at it is also in a much more simplistic way. As humans evolved, we had to, the planet was very harsh. We had to look at surviving in colder places, surviving in warmer places, surviving in places where there was natural abundance of certain kinds of foods or vitamins, and there was not the abundance of certain foods and vitamins, for example, sugar and other things. And because it happened over such a long period of time, each one of us, or like our ancestors, we developed certain genetic qualities to match and to be surviving in the environment that we were in. And over a period of time, that has just been, staying with us. That information, that code, like you said, it's been passed on. Got it. Yeah, exactly. So the people who weren't fit enough, like, Homo deus and like other species, they kind of like fell off, and whichever genes survived, they were passed down. And then we are just a result of all of those, this survival of the fittest, correct? Now so this is back in like thousands of years, but let's look at the modern environment. Because the Well Gene book is so particular about all of these different vitamins, nutrients, brain neurochemistry pathways, and it's made for the modern person. What is in this modern environment, do you think, and that you see in your patients, is making us sicker? Is it pollution? Is it microplastics? Is it EMFs? Like, how do all these modern conveniences like impact what's happening to us?
Even before we go into all of that, the one thing that really impacts our genes and our microenvironment in our body is the lifestyle factor itself. And why do I say this? Look at us, right? We come from a different country, and then we have now, emigrated to Dubai. I come from Malaysia, for example. The environment, the cultural background, the things that I do in Malaysia is completely different than how I live in Dubai, right? Fast-paced life, it's a city life. And is my body built for it? My mind might want it, I might want it, but can my body adapt to it? Because we are built to do some things fundamentally. We have to sleep, we have to eat, we have to work. 3 things. As a child, you go to school. As an adult, you work. But these are 3 fundamental parts of a human being. Wherever in the world, everybody is doing this one way or another, right? But how many hours do you sleep? I believe my quality of sleep here in Dubai is very different than when I'm home in Malaysia, right? And I think if you ask every expat, this could be the same. But if you go to different countries, if I were to go to India and ask somebody, so I go back to Malaysia, it will be a very different conversation. Understanding who you are and how do you, adapt a personalized protocol or personalized regime, that itself affects the way your gene gets expressed and how you protect it. And then you talk about the other things that you say, EMF, microplastics, the environments, stresses, that further adds as a step 2 into all of these things.
So let's talk about the step 2 part, because like we are living in Dubai right now. Everyone who's listening to us, especially in Dubai, can really connect with us on these topics. What are the few things that you see in Dubai that is having the worst impact on our lifestyle and our genetics, essentially?
So I think environment is one, right? Sometimes the weather can be a little bit more harsh, water as well, sometimes a little bit more harsh. Food, for example, I notice people tend to eat out more than they cook, right? No matter how great a restaurant is, they will have to put a certain ingredient that may not be suitable for you. Do you really know what goes into your food unless you cook it? But how often people can essentially do that? Yeah. And I think stress. Stress in the city is crazy. Most patients that I see, stress is the number one thing for them.
Sometimes Talabat and Kita have 50% off. This is a new app. It has 50% off everything. So it makes more sense to just order it. But again, you don't see the other side of like what environment are they cooking in? How many times are they using the same kind of oils again and again? It's been packed in cardboard or microplastic rich containers with heat, and then it comes to you. And yeah, so there are all of these things. Let's talk about your patients. Now, you've seen so many of these reports, and the Wellgene booklet. I'm holding one, but there are two more, and it's so much of information. When you look through your clients, what is that one thing that you find in common that most of them have, or like, is there some specific things that you see more often than others?
Not really. I think everybody is unique. I see different patterns to different people. One thing is that everybody seems to be deficient in some kind of vitamin, or there is an information that they didn't know. For example, being lactose intolerant. I have a lot of Asians.
That's me. That's me. I am lactose intolerant.
I have a lot of Asians who are lactose intolerant, and they think it's a Western disease, And when they find this information out, they themselves are surprised. So as you know, there's 3 booklets, and this 3 gives you very different information, and it's super unique,
Okay. So let's talk about like sensitivities. Now, let's say let's say, like, for example, I am lactose intolerant. What happens if I am raised in an Indian neighborhood, like Indian culture, and for us having lactose, which is a protein found in milk products, is very common, and it's culturally accepted for us that we eat milk, we drink milk, or we have cottage cheese or milk derived products. And if we don't do some kind of testing like this, we would never know that we are intolerant to lactose. What happens in a scenario? I want to look at 2 scenarios. What happens when a person doesn't know? Like, how does it impact his life? And what happens if someone did the test, has a Wellgene report, and that same person now knows about it? Like, what are the 2 ways?
So going back to the same example, I'll tell you in a story form. You come from an Indian household, so I have Indian patients who come to me, and they come with skin presentation full of acne, breakouts, and they ask me why. So I go through a series of tests, and one of the things I tell them to do is do a Wellgene test. And then I tell them, it appears here that you're lactose intolerant. So first they tell me, no doc, I am not intolerant to lactose. And I don't push for it. I said, okay, fine. They say, I've been drinking milk all my life. I'm, let's say, 30 years old. I'm completely fine. It's never bothered me. Okay. I asked them, do you have bloating? Yes, I have bloating. What causes you to bloat? Everything makes me bloat, doc. I don't know. Okay. For my sake, let's do a food intolerance test. I took a food intolerance test. Dairy comes out all red. Intolerant. I say, you're intolerant to dairy. This is no, can't be. I've had this all my life. I'm Indian. Dairy is part of my diet. Then I tell them, take it out for 12 weeks. And you tell me. The next time you have a coffee, ask for a lactose-free coffee, the minimum, or just have it black. All right? And then they come back and they're like, I never knew it was life-changing. Like, it could really be something different. And I asked them, what changed? I'm less bloated now. My skin has become better. So what happens is, because we think that is norm, and we start at a very young age, we sort of build or push for a tolerance, for our body to compensate and accept it. And our body is very smart. In the young age, in the initial years, it accepts. But as you grow older, as it compounds, it presents itself in so many different things, The easier ones are to pick out, like bloating, change in your bowel or stool, diarrhea, feeling uncomfortable. But there's also things like fatigue, brain fog, skin presentation, all this non-specific presentation. And removing such a small element completely changes their whole life. Life-changing. Like I said, I have patients who come to me with brain fog, and changing the way they eat helps them think better, make better decisions. And then they're like, okay, me, myself, my own story. I drank milk milk, of course, I drank from the time I was born, but I had coffee from probably 5 years old. My mother would make me coffee going to school, and I'll be bloated every time I go to school, right? And I thought that was just normal. Something's upset my stomach. Growing up, my wife initially went dairy-free, and I told her, this is not going to work out, you better stop doing this. Then I decided, I will do the Wellgene book for myself, right, in the initial days. And when I did my genetic test, I found out that I was intolerant as well. So I completely stopped. No more bloating. I feel better. And I even took breakfast out. I started doing intermittent fasting because genetically I found that that's beneficial for me. And that's been life-changing. I've never had any of those bloatings ever since. Clear mind, and I can do what I need to do.
Okay. So better decision-making, more energy throughout the day. I think that's what everyone wants, because also it usually all of these things, in my experience, especially when you're having foods which are not suited to your biology, your neurochemistry changes. So you might be having more cravings. You might be having more mood swings. You might get angry at people very fast, or you might tend to have depressive symptoms just because food is the basis of everything that's going on. Food and also like some other choices, but it all starts with food, right? So I think it could be that's why when I first heard about the Wellgene book, more than hearing about it, because I've done few genetic tests in the past, and my experience with those have been that they give you an online document and it only talks about like different genes and how they're expressing and has minimal information. But the Wellgene book, it basically is so beautiful. It has most of these infographics, it has pictures, it's very easy to comprehend. And if people do it at the right time, is there a right time to do it? Like, should you do it when you're a kid or like now?
I think at any point of time, most people want to do it because they want to understand themselves better, whether it's a child or even as an adult, because this tells me fundamentally as a blueprint who you are. Now, I would like to talk about why we did the test, right? So as we went into the whole longevity medicine or the field of science of longevity, what is it? You know, we want to create precision protocols, we want to create personalized protocols. So we have your traditional blood markers like your, LDL, what do you call that? HbA1cs and all of that. They tell you who you are right now, right? These are your traditional conventional biomarkers. Then we want to understand who you are as an individual, which is your genetics. And that's your blueprint. That's the basis that you're in. Then I build the blood test on top of that. Then I look at other things like your proteomics, right? The protein folds in your body. How is that being affected? Then we look at your microbiomics, right? The microbiomes in your gut. How does that affect your system? Because your gut is your second brain, as they say. We put all of this data together and then try to create a personalized protocol for you. So going back to that, when we created the Wellgene book, I wanted to create something that was easy for people to read, to understand, and to go back to it, because it's a lot of data point and sometimes you can't relate to it on that day. You probably have to keep going back and flipping and trying to understand. So when you read or you have these little codes that you can pull out, and like your APOE, and you ask ChatGPT will give you an answer and you can come back to us and look at it. So when you see a certain gene pull up, like you have the vitamin D, for example, 90% or even more, right, of people in Dubai are vitamin D deficient. Every time I test, people are deficient, right? But some people are genetically predisposed and they're being deficient. So they need, so the question is, how do I improve that? Testing, and regular supplementation. So people ask me, do I need to supplement? My answer is, let's look at the data. If the data says that you are at a high risk of being deficient, then you should supplement. Keep your levels at normal, because these are things that you require to function. Another thing that happens, we talk about food, for example. We eat what we are told, and we eat what culturally we are fed, if you get what I mean, right? And then as you adult and as you travel and as you go through problems and you have symptoms, then you change the way you eat. But that should change today, if you ask me. We should eat based on what our genetics and our body says about us. What is it that we are tolerant to, what is beneficial for us, right? So some people understand that there's a family risk of going back to diabetes. So you have probably also a carbohydrate sensitivity. So we got to change, right? I remember your gene, you also had a risk of obesity or something like that.
I have a risk of obesity, carbohydrate sensitivity, salt sensitivity. So if I'm walking by a bakery versus someone else, like chances for me to like stop, I don't eat gluten and stuff. I get over it because of willpower and because of information. But naturally, if you leave me alone and I don't have access to all this information, I will eat all the junk possible in the world.
So that's, as you say, right? Information is your key and power to decision making, right? It's the power over your own life. And now that you know this information, you can make an informed decision. Because the alternative to this is why people say, it's in my gene. What can I do? It's okay, I'll probably get the disease. If I live till 50 years old, I'm great. It doesn't have to be that way. Now understand who you are and what are the changes that you need to make. And it's not a question of why he can do it, I can't do it. Because his gene is different, your gene is different. You have to find other substitute that you can essentially enjoy. Personalize it. And this personalization is the key to longevity and living long.
Okay, so let's break it down, because this entire approach, I think, is one of the very well-structured way to look at it. So a person comes to you, let's say I come to you and I tell you that, which I did, and that I want to find out more about my disease risks, because we have another book which tells you all about your disease risk, even your cancer risk, all of these things. So we do a simple swab of the cheek, and you get some saliva, which then goes to a lab, and then we schedule an appointment, and the Wellgene book is being sent out, or there's a discussion which we also recorded. We can share that with you on a different link about the results, right? So this is step one. How many people just stick to step one and not go to the next level with the blood labs? Is this enough for like a beginner, or
I have a few people who come to me and says, I just want to know the genetic report. But when we go through it, most of the time I tell them, it's best that I have your bloods, because I can tell you what the gene says, but to understand what is being expressed and what's going on right now, I'll need the bloods. Then we combine both this information, and then I give you a more actionable plan. These are the things that you're going to do in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I give you a full blueprint from there. Then I understand how you can use this information for a more actionable response.
okay, perfect. So for example, like look at vitamin E or vitamin D. We could see that I probably have a higher need for vitamin D intake. And then you can look at my bloods, and it could be two ways. Either I have super saturated myself with vitamin D, maybe I go to the beach every day, maybe I take the right supplements, or it could be that I'm doing both of them, but still my vitamin D levels is really low. So this is another way for you to see, okay, perfect. Whatever gene is telling us, the expression of the gene is taking place at the same way as how like the genetic information we have, correct?
So I would like to give another example here is if somebody comes to me and they do the Wellgene booklet and their vitamin D is at low risk, right? So they have normal variant of vitamin D. But because of all that they have read on YouTube and watched, they're like, oh, I should be taking and supplementing vitamin D, and they just keep supplementing. Then I do a blood test and I see that they're 100 plus. And I'm like, you don't need it, right? Why don't you take it off? Try the natural method. Go out in the sun, soak your feet on the ground, spend some time outdoor, and let's look at it. And if they do that and their levels are still sitting at 50, 60, 70, 80, then to me it's like, why? Why do you need a supplement, right? Your body naturally is producing it. Let's look at the other areas that you are deficient in and work on that. So informed decision making.
Yeah, so you could spend that for the average person. You don't need to take 100 supplements. You could save some of that money and then reallocate it towards maybe you're deficient in magnesium, or you're having you're going through some stress. Like you mentioned, one of the things that a lot of people face in Dubai is stress. Do we have certain genes that dictate the amount of stress? Because we also know like some people are much more resilient to stress and some people react much more severely to any kinds of stress. So is this something that can be taught, or is this something in our genes?
It is something in your genes that you can look into, and a lifestyle program that you can build upon. Because stress is not just one thing, it's multiple things put together, right? Cortisol is a hormone directly related to stress, but how you manage in terms of the mental aspect or your mental being, right? And how you handle it is something to look into. How do you recover? For example, the amount of sleep you need to mitigate the cortisol, to mitigate your stress response. What kind of supplementation that you will probably benefit from are certain things that can we look into. I can't tell you if ashwagandha is going to be suitable for you to manage your stress based on genes. I can't do that. But what I can do is if your magnesium is low, your vitamin D is low, your gut is not great, and genetically you already have that risk, then I know this is something I need to mitigate first while I add something like ashwagandha to help you manage your stress. So a lot of people come to us and says, I've tried 10 different things and it's not working. What's wrong with me? How do I improve this? This information helps.
So information, yeah, it's all about knowledge. Like you said, knowledge empowers you to take better decisions. It allows you to plan better. So my question is, if, for example, you have now, like, let's say the father in the family has the knowledge of what's happening in their genetics. The mother has the knowledge of what's happening in her genetics. Now they have a child. Naturally, or according to science, can they kind of predict how this child's DNA will be, or how he will respond to certain things, or is best to get like another Wellgene book for them?
So, for example, right, the father will have a double strand DNA, the mother will also have two strands, right? One strand of each will be taken and made into the child, right? That's what the child will be made of. So not everything in these strands are going to be expressed, right? Genetics will give you that information, and they are passing something down to the child, and the child is made out of these two. This is your genotype, right? The way the phenotype is expressed will be highly dependent on, like I said, environment, lifestyle. So you will understand certain fundamentals, but the child will need to do his version so that we understand what is that variation and risk that, is being created.
So this is why we hear some things like, this child his father had stronger genes or his mother had stronger genes. So sometimes we have this conversation, who's got the stronger genes in the family, and that if the child has certain attributes like the father or like the mother, it could also include like facial structure or like resemblance to one of them or their grandparents, then we say that usually their genes are a bit stronger. Okay, and it makes sense, right? Like, okay, perfect.
So one of the things that people always ask me when they do the booklet is autism. My child is on the spectrum. I want to know, who is it from? Is it me or is it my husband? Right? Very common question I get. And then when we look at it, sometimes we realize that the gene is predominantly expressed on a particular chromosome, whether it's X or Y. Then I also have to tell them, it's not like one of you gave it to him. That's not the case. You had it in your gene. He had it in his gene, right? Probably it came together. It's being expressed in the child. But a lot of things also, plays a role in it. The pregnancy itself, how long you breastfed the child, the microbiome data, and all the other information that we're still collecting, So sometimes it can become very overwhelming, these data points, which is why it has to be in the right hands, and you have to know what you're looking at. How do we mitigate that information?
Mm-hmm. That brings me into another thing. A lot of the people now, especially when now we have these large language models like Claude or ChatGPT, a lot of people will just take some information and then run it through a Claude or a ChatGPT, but that language model doesn't have enough context on their life and doesn't have all the blood work and doesn't have all of these things. What are probably some of the dangers of like being your own doctor and trying to do something with just a little bit of information rather than having a complete book, having the exact information, working with someone as professional as you and your team, and then using ChatGPT?
So these are very, very, very complex data, right? And there is a lot of different points that we have to pull in together. The Wellgene booklet has been made for something as an entry point, something for you to understand who you are as an individual. It is not something I will use to determine genetic-based diseases per se, because that requires a whole genome sequencing, a whole different area, of different type, basically. Now, I have patients who come to me, and after they have done the Wellgene booklet, they feed in some information. It gives them a completely different interpretation, and they come and says, "Doctor, this is what it says, this is what I should do." So what I do with them is I sit down with them, I pull out the history and data from them, and then I help them prompt the LLM in giving them the right answer and direction, putting in the right information, because it's not about just getting an output. It's about understanding how the LLM actually generates or creates this data point. So there's something called a glass box and also a black box. At the moment, the LLM works like a black box. Nobody understands how the data is essentially created, or the output is given, sorry. And we are all we are told that you need to write a prompt that is specific for it. But what is the prompt? What is a health prompt, for example? How do you get it? Nobody knows, right? But if you talk to ChatGPT as if it's your own LLM, and you train it on your data points and give it information, and you tell it exactly, I want you to analyze based on X, Y, Z. This is my age. This is what my data point says. This is what I see. This is what my doctors advise me, right? And this is the output I'm looking for. Ask me as many questions as you need to ensure that you get the right data point. And I would advise you to do it with a doctor who understands how to utilize this. And then you get the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think, like you said, ChatGPT is good for a lot of the things in the world, but if it's not being prompted right, it can mislead you into information that can cause new belief systems, that can cause new habits, and then you'll buy a lot of supplements, or you might do something completely different. So in my opinion as well, working with someone who is trained on this before the LLMs came, I think it's a better way to do it.
This year, I learned something new recently, whereby majority of the research were done on men than women. So someone has actually pointed out that women and minorities are not included in a lot of medical research. So I'm like, whoa, that's a game changer. You know why? Because if these LLMs are pulling out data points and looking at conclusion and looking at statistics, it might miss out that these are women and minorities and these are different data points that you're looking at. So when they want to put those two data together, it may not match and the LLM is not going to be able to understand that. So we are still very early on. The way we have looked at science is at individual data points, right? We did this sub-study, it gave us this result. We did this, experiment, we gave this result. Today, it's now moving into a harmonization of these data points, like an orchestra, different strings, different pieces that are working together. But what I think the LLM doesn't completely understand, and I'm very sure they're already working in the back end for it, is what are all the pieces that requires to be in this particular orchestra to play the right kind of music? That is something that is being built. So while we pull out information, we have to be very careful, especially if you want to use that information for decision making. So don't randomly make decisions just because ChatGPT says something. It is smart. It may give you the answer you are looking for, but it might not be the right answer that you should be obtaining.
Yeah, like you said, have the booklet, have more information. Once in a while, if you want to ask it a question, again, share it with your practitioner, and then you can go about doing it. When you look at just the average person in Dubai, do people really, the thing is, like, for me, I hang around mostly around people who care about these things, and I think you as well. But on an average, do you think the average person in Dubai really cares about having their genetics tested out? Or they believe on this destiny? And
I love the city, and I tell you, one of the reasons why I love the city is I feel people are very curious and they want to have the edge in their life. They want to know why and how can they improve that. I also see a lot of problems that people want to solve, right? Especially because we live in such a multi-ethnic, multi-racial country. Different people want to understand what's happening to them. How do they make a more informed decision? So people are curious. People want to know. I come from Malaysia, right? In Malaysia, for example, it's not as much. Why do I need to know that? It doesn't matter. But here I feel it matters, even for the average Joe, because you're like, how is he different? Why am I different? What gives him the added advantage that I don't have? How do I work that out? And then they're willing to look at. So yeah. And biohacking, for example, everybody wants to biohack something today. I easily know 10, 15 families who have a whole array of biohacking stuff in their homes built in, right? I think your business is also built on that, right? So people want to know, and they like this information. So,
Great. Yeah, we just need to spread more awareness about it so more and more people can just, look at, not just schedule like a one-off doctor visit, but like actually have something like this, which stays with them for life, if I'm not wrong. Correct? So your genes are not going to change in one lifetime. So the data that the WellGene system pulls out and translated into the book also doesn't change for a very long time. So it's like a one-time investment. And, if you take this investment and you divide it by the number of years you're living and probably the extra years you will get because of this, it's massive.
I've had patients who come to me, do the WellGene test, and then they tell me after that, oh, actually, doc, I've done something similar. Just I didn't understand what happened.
That was me. I did one or two things which were different, and it was very hard to comprehend. And I can look at some data and make sense out of it. A little bit, I would say, better than the average Joe, but still for me, it was very, very difficult.
Which is why WellGene, we wanted something very simple. You can pull it out, you can understand it, even gives you actionable points where you need to look at. And if you want to take that out and Google it, at least you're in the right direction.
What are some of the most troublesome genes that you think exist? Are there categories of like good genes, bad genes? Like here's the genes, like you won a lottery if you had these genes, and like you kind of like lost the lottery if you had these genes.
Very interesting question. I think it's hard to say if you've got good genes and bad genes. It's like people. I don't think there's good people and bad people. I just think it's bad company. You get what I'm saying? So one guy may not be dangerous, but 5 of the same guys put in a bad environment may create, something that is not, how do I say this, in the right way? You might create bad company and make bad decisions. Same thing. A single gene on its own may not be harmful. combination of different genes that goes wrong and multiple mutations ends up becoming troublesome.
It's interesting. It reminds me of this study that was done a few years ago, or maybe like 10 years ago or more, where they looked at certain prisoners in the USA. And what they did was they started giving all of these prisoners multivitamins, and their aggressiveness, the way they were behaving in front of others, the fights in the prison, like all of these things which are associated with like rowdy behavior or like criminal-like behavior, they completely changed. And I was so surprised. That means like just replenishing some of the most basic things. And we know that most common multivitamins don't do a lot. They have like fairy dusted ingredients, but still that was good enough for these people who probably come from like a lower socioeconomic background, or
And they're super deficient, and their whole entire ecosystem is basically in a mess, and they just required small assistance to be in the right direction.
yeah. And it's so surprising. Like only like it doesn't have to be the big changes. It doesn't have to be things that are so expensive. You don't have to, go for different like psychotherapies and different healing centers and all of these things. If you just fix your biology at the most prime level, the impact that it can have is massive. So let's talk about this. Let's say, for example, someone's facing some issues, and then they look at they're deficient in something, how, and they replenish it. How soon do people start noticing a difference? Is it everyone like a similar timeline, or is it different
It's
for
different.
different body?
Everybody is different.
Everyone's different.
Some people might find it a bit earlier, some people will be a bit later, depending on what they're deficient in and why.
Okay, got it. So you said there are no bad genes, just okay. So let's rephrase the question this way. A lot of the times, what is considered in today's world good is that if you can go to sleep, there are some people who you could put them in a room full of crowded people, and when they decide to sleep, they can sleep, right? There are some people who look at different kind of like stressful situations, and they can just like dust it off and like not be stressed about it. For some people, it bothers it too much. For some people, can eat as much as they want. They can have Pizza Hut, they can have McDonald's, they can have all of these things, but they'll still have like a flat tummy, or sometimes even a six pack. And for some people, they don't eat too much, and yeah. So I guess like these combination of things, and most people are always like, why can this? Every time I meet people, they're like, I saw this influencer, and this influencer can eat like 4,000 calories and nothing happens to him or her. And like I try to eat even 2,000 calories and I get either bloated or I put on weight. So I think this is something that is so prevalent. And that's what I meant by like good genes, bad genes. Most of the people, they want to get their genes in a certain way, but we know that cannot happen at this point. Let's fast forward to the future. Do you think the future, and I know we were talking offline about this, what do you think the future have for us, according to whatever you know right now, whatever you've been to so many different conferences, and you have a longevity conference also coming in Dubai. So what do you think is the future of this? Will we be able to say that, you know what, I need a six pack all my life, so I'm going to kind of like edit my gene or do something and I'll increase those good numbers? Will that be possible?
I'm not sure in terms of like, for example, getting a six packs, but I already know in certain therapies like cancer therapy, for example, there are gene silencing therapies to help improve the outcome. Because when you talk about genes, there also is activation of trigger points, right? Normal, boom, disease, right? And then when it gets activated, then it turns to full blown. So it's like cancer. Every one of us have cancer genes. What activates the cancer genes? The environment, all that. So that there's an activation point of the phenotype. So when it gets activated, how do you reduce that risk and mitigate that risk, so to speak? Does it alter completely? It doesn't. It's more all risk mitigation. What I think is going to change the future is how personalized medicine and data is going to be. We are not taught about genetics when we are in medical school. We understand genes, we understand how DNA strands are, but we don't study on how do we utilize genetic information in clinical decision making. That's not there. That will be there. And I think that is going to change. Like I said, last time we looked at data points as singular units. Data. Now it's going to be a harmonization of data. Once this data becomes harmonized and it becomes a singing piece, I think what will happen is AI is essentially going to help you and says, okay, CJ, these are all your genes, this is your lifestyle, these are all the things that you have gone through, right? These are the things that you can do to achieve this outcome. Give it a shot. So it's not just about hire a personal trainer, go on a low carb diet, achieve results. It's going to be because CJ has gone through A, B, C, D, E in the last 10 years, perhaps he should be doing exactly this to help mitigate his outcome. I also believe that our personal health data will probably sit in some kind of decentralized blockchain technology at some point, which you own, right? A little chip. I'm now hypothesizing here, right? A little chip that you own that tells you who you are as an individual, that you can essentially use that to code and say, okay, this is who CJ is. This is what the cell is saying about him. These are things that we're going to essentially do and work. And I think we were having this conversation about the company, right? As you were saying.
Yes, you can talk to your cells.
Yeah, how you can talk to your cells. And there's a technology that's being built on that. These are the changes that I think are going to take place.
No, that's amazing. Like I look at whenever I put on my future hat and I think like what's going to happen in the next 100 years, and the way this technology and the way science is now so exponential, especially with AI, and once the artificial general intelligence will come, it will even be massive. So I'm pretty hopeful. But for now, do you think, because like let's take a simple example, right? Because I want to kind of like just take examples that are relevant to the everyday person. A lot of, especially now over here, a lot of people in the UAE, because of not sleeping, because of lack of movement, lack of sunlight, stress factors, all of these things, people are gaining weight. Okay, for the longest period of time, it's always been go work out at the gym, eat less, make sure that you go to all these different kind of like fat freezing treatments and all of these other sort of modalities. But now with science, we can just look at, okay, perfect. These are the hormones that are responsible for hunger and for cravings. And then these are the hormones that are responsible for satiety. So we could just take a, GLP-1 agonist and just either have a pill or inject us. And then we just completely shut off that hunger pathway. So I know a lot of people in Dubai are going through this. What's your take on this? Because some people are for it, some people are against it. I want to know your...
GLP-1 is an amazing drug. It's been there for some time now, right? Manjaro, which is a GLP-1 plus GIP-1, is superb. A lot of studies are showing a lot of beneficial benefits for it. But while majority of people are seeing benefits, there are also downsides, and we cannot discount the complications or the side effects that comes for it. And you can't use this as a shortcut. You shouldn't. You can't be on a drug for lifelong to suppress your hunger, because when you suppress something, there's an opportunity cost to this. When you are suppressing, for example, your hunger, what you're actually also doing is you're slowing down the motility of your gut. Right? And when your gut motility gets affected, the way you absorb vitamins starts to change, the way your bowel output starts to change. And what's going to happen in 30, 40 years? Nobody really completely know. Right? We already understand early on, when you have all this gut paralysis, it's going to cause you a lot of side effects. And I'm already I had deal with a lot of complications of people who had been a GLP-1 to lose weight, and they're on the maximum dose, like 15 milligrams, and they can't lose the weight anymore. And then they come to me like, I want to lose weight. What else can I do? What's next? Then they're like the next best drugs. So you're like a drug addict, that you keep getting. One of the things that we look at in Wellgene, for example, is I try to understand genetically what workouts are most suitable for you. Cardio, HIIT-based,
all of that information,
or is it strength training? Because we have people out there who says do more strength training as you build muscle is more beneficial, longevity. But for some people, maybe it's the cardio and the HIIT workouts that's a bit more beneficial for them. You see? So do we use these GLP-1s? If you really need to, if you're obese, it's difficult, you can't control your cravings, for example, you can't control your hunger. Yeah, we can use this as a tool, but use it as a tool, not as a shortcut,
Dr. Ebenezer, I can keep talking to you about so many different things, but I think we have a separate episode recorded for that where we went over some of the My Gene results and you were talking to it. We'll have the link for the audience. But before I let you go, I need to ask you this. If you had a time machine, you could go back in time and give yourself one or two pieces of advice, what would that be?
I think if I can go back in time and change the way we would do things is I'll try to, incorporate these data points to make better decisions, to understand myself better. I wish I had done this as a child, to be honest. Perhaps it would help me through school even better. Understanding what is my edge, that's one thing definitely I would do. And I would have started checking myself significantly earlier. So for example, quick example, I had gallstones that I never knew, and had to take out my gallbladder. I was always healthy. I never had high cholesterols, but I had bloating. and it was an accidental find that found it. Today, I understand it was because of pigmentations and what causes it, and sometimes it may not have shown in my bloods, but the way I process cholesterol was slightly different. If I had this information, I could have made a more informed decision on what I need to look out for example.
So knowledge is key, knowledge is power. I think this is one of the most fundamental themes of this podcast. I think we should title this podcast the same. We'll see. Now, let's give everyone a chance to get this knowledge. Where can people find you? Where can people find the Wellgene book? How do we go about it?
So we're on social media. You can go to Verve Wellness DXB on Instagram, or you can go to our website, which is vervewellness.ae, VERVEWELLNESS.ae. Send us a message and we will send a team across to you to get a swap, and we'll build you the program.
Mm-hmm. And guys, it was super simple. They send a team. It takes less than 5 minutes. The book comes in 21 days, and then you can get a meeting and a consultation with Dr. Ebenezer and his team, and it's absolutely fantastic. I think, again, like he said, having the right knowledge, not a knowledge which is biased, not something that your personal trainer believes because of what they have seen, not something that your parents believe because they are being raised in a household. Unbiased knowledge, which is precise, can change your life. And Dr. Ebenezer, thank you so much for bringing this to the world. I truly appreciate it, and I'm glad we could do this together.
Thank you so much, Jay. Pleasure. Thank you.